Well, I'm super excited for this conversation today. I have been stalking Alex. I met Alex as part of one of my masterminds that I'm a part of. And ever since hearing him speak about storytelling and what he's so passionate about helping women get their stories out there, I really wanted to have him on the podcast. So thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today, Alex.
This is a great joy for me, Christine. Thank you so much. I'm truly honored to be here and I'm excited for where the conversation is going to go.
Yeah, me too. So we've already been talking before we hit record. Then I
Hmm.
had to stop you because I was like, let's wait till we hit record. So let's just dive straight in. So tell me a little bit more about the women that you work with to help them really elevate their stories, to discover their stories, and where this passion even came from.
Yeah. So, I mean, most of the work that I do right now is one on one coaching. It's let's get into it. Let's discover your story and turn it into a message that matters. So you show up and you're speaking without confusion, complete clarity. That's the work that I'm doing and helping women, right? Mostly in business, mostly personal brands do that work and see how the thing that they're passionate about, the business that they've started, is actually linked all the way through their story. The transformation you want to lead people through is so inherently linked to the transformation you've been through. And I get the great joy of helping people discover that and put it into words that they are confident to share with the world. Because when you share your story, you shape the world. And that's kind of the driving belief for me. So, I mean, yeah, it goes back in my story about how I got here. I'm a story coach because I've been telling stories my entire life. My mom was an actress. My mom and dad both grew up in Britain, and then they left at 18 and 20 years old to live their dreams. My dad was a photographer. My mom was an actress. So we just sort of absorbed storytelling. And then I put that into practice as an actor. I wanted to follow my mom's footsteps. So I was an actor, and then I was a public speaker and a youth pastor, and always, I don't know if you feel like this, Christine, probably not. You're probably like, nah, I'm so good at my message, but I feel confused sometimes.
I've had lifetimes before this.
Uh-huh.
What do you want to
Yeah.
know?
But I found like it was always so frustrating for me, whether I was putting on a character like on stage or I was speaking my own unique message in whatever context. I was so concerned about how the audience was reacting or how they would react. And I realized that that was pulling away from the clarity of my own message
Mm.
because I cared more about them than just doing something that was authentic within. And it was actually 10 years ago now. We just celebrated 10 years of my mom. Didn't celebrate. We just recognized 10 years of my mom passing. Um, and it was a few days before she passed. I had a conversation with her, a serious conversation, one of the ones that you have when you know that this person is going. And I asked her, like, what was it that you loved most about being an actress? And she said it was the gift of entertainment. It was the gift. It was being able to give the audience a gift. That's how she saw it. It was like she
Wow.
goes on stage, she makes them laugh, she makes them cry, whatever, but she felt like she was sharing a story with them that then they would take with them out into their lives when they leave the theater.
Yeah.
And something for me snapped there where I realized, oh, this has to come from me first. And then I share something so authentically from me that it becomes a gift for them that they get to go and do whatever they want with. And so here I am, I mean, 10 years later now, helping people not only discover their story, but put it into words and share
Mm.
it with the world to give other people a gift.
Love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I totally understand what you mean by the level of confusion because it's almost like, and I feel like I'd love for you to clarify the difference between someone having like a business pitch compared to their
Hmm.
story. I'd love for you to clarify that because I can imagine, like, even when I ask, like, I go to events and I meet other women in business, and it's almost like you get the look, you see the look on their face where they're literally
Yeah.
like, looking around, going, and they almost like lose track of what they're trying to tell you.
Uh huh.
And
Uh
it's
huh.
like, what am I supposed to be telling people? Like, what do you do for your business and how did you get into this? And like, you're like, what am I supposed to be telling people? So I'd love for you to clarify that, the difference between that pitch and the story and where it all fits.
Yeah. Well, I always start with, can you tell me who you are right now? So if I can just bounce this right back to you, Christine, like, what do you do?
So I work
Just,
with women in business. Yeah. So I'm a business
yeah,
mindset coach and I help them get out of their own way. So help them stop self-sabotaging their success.
great. So brilliant. You gave me a title and an impact. That's what I think we look for. But what people get nervous about, or what people, when they feel flustered, they feel like they're confused, they can't answer that. And they feel like they have to justify, or they say what you just said. But then before another question is asked, you go into this justification process of telling me how you got here without really rhyme or reason of the process. And you've now confused the whole situation. I forget what you do or what impact you're making.
And then they go, "What was the question you asked?"
Exactly. So if somebody here would be the best advice I can give you is start with the now, right? I always like when we talk about story, there's the now, and then we'll go backwards and find out how you got here. But all that you know about the story is the page that you're on right now. And it doesn't go beyond this. You don't know what the next page is. So just look at now. Who are you now? What do you do? And what impact do you want to make? Or what impact do you see it making? And if you're introducing yourself to someone, you're at the next networking event or something, get really clear on that. I'm your story coach, helping you share your story to shape this world with clarity. That's it.
Love it.
Now,
So
if you want to
clear.
know more, feel free. Ask me, well, how did you get into that? Now we can go into the story mode, right? Now we can go into how do you shape that story and start to tell the story without talking their ear off and actually captivating them. But at its most basic point, get really clear on that point and you're good to go, I
Mm,
think.
love that. It's almost like you're waiting for the permission to tell a little bit more of your story.
Yeah, I think so. And it's not something that it's a natural question to ask, right? We'd rather leave them wanting more, as it
Yeah.
were. And like you got to give people the right. Like if you say, "Hey, yeah, I'm a dancer. I do clog dancing, and I think that it really helps people fall in love with I." I don't know,
Their
the
heritage
culture
of
in
being Welsh.
Holland, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. If I led with that and you're like, really not interested, and I don't see how this is going to support me, I'm going to politely say, wow, very
That's
cool. Okay,
great.
I'm gonna go get a drink. You gotta have your good
Yeah.
segue message. But my maybe my problem, I don't know, is I'm gonna go, you're kidding me. That's a business. Tell me more.
Yeah.
How did you get into that? And then you're going to do that. So I just think it's actually respecting the person asking the question and saying, like, here's the answer to your question.
Yeah.
Do you want to know more? Then ask more.
Awesome.
But so many people just, don't know. Would you agree? They don't know how
Yeah.
to answer that first question.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So tell me a little bit more about why you believe it's so important that as a business owner or a personal brand, whether we want to do speaking or not, that we have our story down pat.
Yeah, because there is this confidence. I think it starts with clarity and leads to confidence, which then allows you to show up consistently.
Mm,
So if you might be showing up again, you've got this business, great. Or let's say, great, I'm showing up and I'm saying, I'm your story coach. And people say, wow, how did you get into that? And I could say, well, 3 years ago, I was at a mastermind and I had a totally different business idea that was about actually speaking about the next generation in businesses and helping Gen Z work in corporate. And then somebody said, you're a really good speaker. You should help us speak. And so here I am 3 years later, teaching people how to communicate better. I could tell that story, but that's not my actual story. That doesn't tell me why. That doesn't tell you why. That just shows that there was a problem and then something miraculous happened that
mm,
led me here, right?
mm.
The importance of you knowing your own story, Christine, is it's actually for you first. We think about this and a lot of this work is like, oh, I need to know my story so I can market better. But truthfully, everybody listening needs to hear understanding your story is first for you so that you can look at yourself in the mirror and say, look how far I've come. So you can see the transformation that, yeah, so much of my life, I have felt confused in my identity. I've felt confused in how I should show up and do they like me? Will they like me? Won't they? I've just desperately longed for clarity so long along the way. And now that I've found it, I know that it's possible. So any day that I wake up and I feel confused in the work that I'm doing and why I'm showing up, and is this business ever going to thrive? Is this actually going to work? I actually have this story of proof to say, oh, my transformation is from confusion to clarity. And so if today I feel confused, I know that clarity is possible because I've been there before and I can see this happen today. So that's what I mean. First, I think the most important thing around this has nothing to do with marketing. Just do this work for you. You deserve it. You
Mm.
deserve to see the journey you've been on. You deserve to see the problems you've gone through and how far you've freaking come to get to the point you're at now, to stand up with the passion that you have to build the business that you want to build and make the impact that you want to make. That's the power of your story first.
Mm. I
Yeah.
absolutely agree. I think so many of us, we are so focused on the now or the future that we actually
Mm,
forget to acknowledge how far we have actually come. And that's actually how we build self worth and self trust, right? Like to actually take the
yes.
time to acknowledge. It's actually also how you overcome the imposter syndrome, is actually acknowledge what you bring to the table, right? Like what
Mm-hmm.
you've actually
Mm-hmm.
been able to overcome. And if you don't take the time to really shape that story that makes it meaningful for you, that story can actually kick you in the butt. Like that story can
Yeah.
be a negative story until you shape it to be a positive.
Yep. Well, I think, and that's the piece with imposter syndrome. That's, as you say, right there, right? That's that confidence. So you get clear. Now I'm like, oh, good. Okay. Yeah. I know my story. I get it. I went from this to this. Amazing. Now I also get to show up with this confidence to say, like, wow, like I see so many other people out there doing these things and really confused. Why isn't my business succeeding? Anytime that I face confusion or that feeling of how I felt, now I go, oh, you know what? That's okay. That's their story. This is my story. Or somebody looks like they're doing something very similar to me. I go, that's okay. Their service looks very similar, but my story is completely
Mm,
unique.
love that.
I can't be an imposter if I'm just living out my unique story.
Mm,
I'm not faking anything. I'm being as authentic as I can possibly be. So I think that's the next level, is once you do the inner work, now you start to turn that outwards and say, oh, if I show up like this, now I'm actually being that authentic self that really starts to stand out in the world today.
mm.
And it's, again, it's going to be more confident, more powerful, and really start to make a difference.
Yeah, and that authenticity speaks volumes because you can feel the difference between a practiced story speech of like, this is the story that I tell, compared to that
Yeah.
authenticity that comes through in that powerful message. And I feel like,
Yeah.
and Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like the key piece that was missing from what the first way that you described your experience to in the second was actually a lot of emotive words. Like you actually tapped
Mm.
into the emotion. Like the first one felt like, yeah, it's a nice
Mm-hmm.
thing to have, but the second one was
Yeah.
very much like, this is how I felt. Is that the thing?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Brilliant. Yeah. Because people think that what I hear a lot, right? Let's call it my podcast is called No Boring Stories. I'm really on, and like, there should be no boring stories out there. There's only boring storytellers. So, a boring story, or the way that somebody would tell a boring story, is to say, like, yeah, no, I went from um, broke to CEO. You're like, okay, no, I get it. There's something happening there, but that's just a title shift. That's
Mm,
all that is, poor to
it's not a
rich or something. You're like,
transformation. Mm,
yeah, there might be. You're like, okay, no, I can visualize that. I can see, but it's actually, if I didn't experience that, if I can't like tap into or visualize those experiences, it's hard for me as a listener to actually identify with that story. Now, if you tell me that how you felt when you were broke, I felt lost, I felt powerless, I felt stuck. And now, as a CEO, I feel powerful, I feel impactful, I feel purposeful. Now, my story is going from powerless to purposeful. Hey, if you felt powerless at some point in your life, I think I can connect with you. And so now people are going like, well, yeah, I wasn't never broke. I actually grew up in like a really wealthy home, but I have felt powerless. So I get that. And I do want to feel purposeful. So now I believe that if that's your story, maybe you can take me along that same journey. So those are, yeah, as you say, those are the emotions rather than the titles. When we tap into the emotions that we feel and how I felt versus how I feel, that's what really captivates and will connect with the audience in like a
Mm,
much bigger way than we could ever imagine. Because emotions, we can
everything.
get into emotions, but I mean,
Yeah.
emotions are truly what sell a product, but emotions are more importantly what connect humans together. So the
Mm,
more you can focus on the emotions rather than simply the status or the title, that's where your story is really
yeah.
going to jump out.
Because I think that's really what your mum was talking about, right? Like she left people
Mm.
feeling something and they walked
Yes.
away. And I think a natural human, process is that our brain will always go, well, what does this mean for me? In everything that we listen to and everything that we experience, it's always like, but what does this mean for me? It's a natural
Uh-huh.
part of what our brain does. So that's automatic, right? You don't have to take or ask a client that or ask someone that to go, well, this is how what it means for you through that
Yeah.
storytelling. I think that's what the power of storytelling is
Yeah.
that it's memorable. That's what creates that space, right?
I mean, they say that when someone starts hearing a story, when their brain starts to just the minute that it goes, oh, this is a story that I'm hearing,
It's like,
that
oh.
yeah, there's a relaxing, but there's also this like um it looks like the synapses that start firing in the brain as I look at the activity. It looks like fireworks. It's all parts of the brain are working now. This is prefrontal cortex. Like, what does this mean? How can I translate this? This is like logic. Like, okay, what's the focus here? This is visual. Can I actually imagine that? This is trust building and emotion. It's all of the parts of the brain firing together. And as you say, working to say, can I put myself in this story? Because that's really what we're looking for is
Mm,
for what, yes, you are the main character of your own story. So when you hear someone else tell their story, you are naturally putting yourself in that or seeing what would I do in that situation? How would I have handled that? You are going through that process. Or
mm,
if you feel like, wow, that story is incredible, they really just explained what I've been through. Isn't that crazy? You're right. It's just this immediate, like you see yourself in it. You don't just receive, you're always processing through your own experience. And and when experiences connect, that's where I think that something's really magical. Something's
yeah.
happening here that's beyond the explanatory, really. It's
Love it.
yeah.
Yeah. So I have to ask, what do you say to people that come to you and they're like, I don't really have a story. Like, I don't have a story. Because I feel like I went through this at the earlier stages of
Hmm.
my business because I would see these, huge transformational stories. And I was like, well, I wasn't abused as a child. I don't have that to
Hmm.
say. Like, I
Yeah.
think in the
Yeah.
coaching space, that can be seen a lot of like, this is how I experienced my childhood and this is the transformation I've had. But
Hmm.
what do you
Hmm.
say to someone that goes, well, I don't really have this big, powerful story that you're trying to make it mean that I do, but I don't.
Yeah. Yeah. I say, let's get on the phone. I
Yeah.
say,
Like I call
because,
bullshit.
yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah. Because the, the lie there is attached to shame. So my story is boring, which really they're saying, I don't want to get up and share my story, which really is attached to this shame that my story isn't as exciting as Johnny. I wasn't addicted to drugs. I didn't, I wasn't abused, whatever. I didn't go broke. Uh, and the thing is as I said, I was a youth pastor for a long time, and I would often work with kids as they were like going through this process and they were going to get baptized, and it's this whole big ceremony, and then they get up and there's like this 14-year-old that reads their story of like, here's how God helped me, and I would coach them through that, like, here's how you tell your story. And even back then, before I knew that this process existed, the kids would say, I don't want to go through this ceremony because I don't want to tell my story because my story is boring. And it's amazing because I'm talking about a 14-year-old there, but I'm seeing and hearing the exact same thing as what you just
Yeah.
described with 34 and 44-year-olds now who are saying, I don't want to share my story. Well, guess what? It's keeping you Not sharing your story is keeping you from connecting with the crowd, connecting with the audience, sharing in something special, actually exploding. And so it's not about having something exciting. Not all stories are action stories. Not all movies are action movies, right? Few of them actually are.
Mm.
Mostly a story doesn't have to have this explosive moment. Mostly our stories have to do with I grew up, I was pretty creative as a kid, but then I, went to a school where that was kind of knocked out of me and I didn't find ways to express my creativity. And then I went to a therapist when I was 25 and she said to me, why don't you try painting? And I picked up a brush for the first time in 12 years and I haven't stopped. And I've been selling art for the last 15 years and it's being hung up in people's homes, making a difference to how they feel every day. That's mostly our stories, is going from like, again, right? Look at this, like boxed in to bursting forth. That's a
Mm.
story. And it just had to do with somebody who felt like, I don't know, like, what did I have? Because the turning point was a moment in your therapist office. We don't think it's exciting. The
Yeah.
turning point was drinks out with your girlfriends when finally somebody called you on your bullshit. And you're like, yeah, that's not that big though, right? Like, no, but that's it. That's what we're all looking for, is that turning point. We just want to know what made you shift, what changed you.
Mm.
For me, it was a conversation that I didn't think would be meaningful, but of course it was. Sitting next to my mom at this precious moment when she said something that I was just like, hey, what did you think about this? And she said this profound thing that now is like a motto of my life.
Wow. Wow. That's it. And I think that you've got to take the time to unpack it and acknowledge it for what it is rather than actually shut it down as it's boring. And I think, yeah,
Yeah.
tapping into that is powerful. That's awesome.
So, and I think part of that is just, if I could just
Yeah, yeah.
hammer down a little bit, it's giving some grace to the moments that you have had. You've had a lot of time on this planet, some a lot more than others, and some will admit to a lot more than others. But to look back and see, you're looking for this transformative, explosive. It was when I got fired, or it was a hard moment. It was the divorce that happened. Maybe it was the conversation that happened before that gave you the strength to go and say, I want a divorce. It wasn't the divorce, or right. Or maybe that didn't happen, but it's the conversation that you had before that said, give it another shot. And so you've been in a marriage now for 25 happy years since that. Because of that small conversation that happened, those are the moments. They're easier to find than you think they are, once we give ourselves grace to say those actually are transformative and those matter.
Mm. That's it. That's
Yeah.
everything, because I think that's what life is all about. Like it's all those small
Mm-hmm.
moments. It's not about these big, massive things because they're few and far between. And I think that also
Yes.
translates to business because I think that we have this expectation or have the same situation where we're like, oh, I didn't have these massive milestones in business.
Yeah.
But you did. You just didn't stop to actually acknowledge them, right? And I think that business can be like this as a wave or a journey where we're having massive highs and massive plateaus, and we're also having lows. But
Yeah.
the lows feel bigger, but we don't take the
Mm-hmm.
time to actually acknowledge the highs, and
Yeah.
then it all feels like a barrel of shit,
Yep.
almost,
Yep.
right?
I was working with someone a couple months ago, I guess, and her story ended up being like, her transformation was from proving it, a lifetime of trying to prove her worth to people, to owning it. And that came out of this this conversation where, like, talking about her business, and she ran this. She got into real estate and then started to build a team, and then created her own team and left this old thing that she was a part of, and created her own team of agents, and works less now than she ever had. And her business was bringing in something like 500,000 with her sitting on the phone talking to me. And she's like, yeah, but I feel so stuck. I was like, did you hear what you just told me? And it was this eye-opening light bulb moment where she voiced it to me, didn't even recognize the attitude that she was saying it with. And as
Mm,
soon as I said it back, I'm like, you still don't think that that's enough. You're
Mm.
still trying to prove something else. Well, what if you just sat here and owned the success that's in that? And then you run with that and you go, oh, I own that. I don't have to prove that to anybody. I just get to sit in that. That's my story. And
Mm.
it's just that simple. It's exactly what you're saying. We don't even recognize it unless we look back and see it for what it is.
And it's a lot of challenge for a lot of women. I work with a lot of women with that same issue where it's literally
Yeah.
like we're constantly having to prove our worth. And it's
Yeah.
through that we are going after the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, and we don't stop to actually acknowledge what we have achieved. And that then
Mm,
perpetuates the need to actually keep going. So sometimes it comes from a scarcity mindset, or it comes from a space of, well, as a child, I had to prove my worth to get love or attention
mm-hmm.
from a parent. And then obviously having to then, that's in every relationship, in every part of our life, that we're always trying to prove our worth and our value. But you're right, we
Yeah.
stop and we take stock and go, well,
Mm-hmm.
actually, everything that you've achieved, everything that you've overcome, you did that. No one else did that. And
Yeah.
that allows us to stop and actually sit in that and own it and feel that level of worthiness. So you don't need to prove it to anybody once you prove it to yourself.
Yeah. Oof. That's hear that again. You don't need to prove it to anybody once you prove it to yourself. That's a good line. And I think that's it to speak to specifically. Yeah, that most of my clients are women, and we were talking about this before as to why that is and what those stories are. And I think a lot of this, as you say, you're highlighting now. Yeah, a lot of the stories that I hear start with some sense of unworthiness, not good enough. Not not that's it. It's a lot of that. It's a lot of proving. And I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know. Again, I sit here and I get the joy of finding them at the place that they are now, where they have this, you have this passion, you have this idea that you're trying to get out, and we get to talk about this merely as the past. But also you feel that showing up again right now, don't you? That voice is still speaking. So let's put a story to that is true of how you've overcome that, so that the next time that you feel that tomorrow morning, you get to say, yeah, but I'm not there anymore.
Yes.
I'm here.
Oh, so good. So
So
good. I
that's
put
that seems to
goosebumps.
be yeah, that's where I really get fired up in this. It's like, sure, I can nerd out. I could talk about storytelling and speaking all day, every day. Let's get into the nitty gritty of it if you want to. But really, I'm in this for that kind of impact where I get to
Yeah.
see somebody be more clear on who they are
It's that
now.
confirmation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how powerful that is.
Freaking powerful. So powerful. And I think that the more we see more women speaking up and actually having that voice and sharing their story and validating that level within themselves, but also helps to validate other women that no matter what your story is, when you do own it, that's that level of authenticity that comes through. And I think that that's powerful in itself. That changes the world for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. It spreads out.
Yeah. So I'd love to dive into a little bit more about speaking. So I know that you help a lot of other women work with speaking, and you've worked with doing TEDx coaching and things like that, which
Mm-hmm,
is amazing. So
mm-hmm,
firstly, selfishly, I want to ask, what makes a really great TEDx talk?
mm-hmm. uh, I mean, the focus is on ideas, right? So you think TED, you think ideas. That's it. So you got to start. What's your idea? And I have my own kind of format that I work through, but the thing is going to be an idea, and what's your story attached to that. You can give me all the information after that, but that's what's going to captivate is a strong idea and a captivating story to go with it, or stories. You stand up and you deliver that, then you're more watched, you're more listened to. All of a sudden you just stand out because you've got something that is clear, uh clearly impacting others. That's what I've got. That's what I
Love it.
see, that's what I hear, that's how I've helped people kind of develop something, and yeah,
It's what
goes
makes
around
us
that.
watch them, right?
Exactly.
Mm.
So there's a title, there's might be a catchy title or something that goes with it, or you see that it's got more views than someone else that draws you to it, but you're staying in because what? Because the magic of TED is they just jump right in.
Mm.
There's no pretense. There's no, hey, oh, well, the drive to get here was hell, wasn't it? No, it's just, they just jump right into the goods. They've got a limited time. So they give you only the good stuff.
Mm.
And within that good stuff, it's usually rooted in, here's my idea. Here's the story that got me to this idea. Here's the proof around this. And now here's what's possible of how we can change the world if we put this into action.
Yeah. Awesome. So good. So, what are some of the mistakes that you see some speakers make out there?
Mm, mm.
Where do I start?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I used to, again, kind of in my youth work days, I would run events for hundreds of teenagers, and I was in charge of bringing in speakers for a weekend. And at that time, that was my main role. So I was just studying these speakers, these people that we're paying to be here, and I would watch them and I would just take notes. I'm like, you went too long. You missed a mark there. You're looking at your notes. Why are you looking so much at your notes? What is going on here? You're not actually engaged in the audience. Why are you spending 40 minutes telling a story and 3 minutes telling any information? You're like, sure, that's something, but what do we actually know at the end of this, except for this funny story? So there's a lot of things, honestly, that I learned from that. But I think that ultimately this would come down to, do you know, the mistake is you're not telling your story at all. And you're
Mm.
starting with, here's 5 points around my favorite subject. And go, great. But I don't know why I should trust you.
Yeah.
That's it. It's just straight into, here's the information. Let me open a textbook and read it to you. Whereas the best way to start would be, hey, here's who I am. Let's break the ice a little bit. Here's my story of how you know that I'm an authority to speak about this. And now we'll get into the goods. So I think that there's something around that. There's a whole piece around audience engagement of, are you actually listening? Are you engaged? Are you looking? Are you listening to the audience in the house? I know that's harder with Zoom stuff, but it's not impossible when you see people on your Zoom call. You can see, you can engage them in the chat. You can invite them to engage in the chat all along the way. And if a question shows up, you should take a second and engage with that question to let them see that you see them. These are really important things to engage the audience along the way and let them know that you need them. I think that's again, if the first one is you're not starting with your story, the second one would be, let the audience know that you need them here. Because I think if we're sitting in the audience and we feel like this guy's speaking to an empty room, then what does it matter if I'm there or not? We want to be engaged. We want to feel important. So make me feel important. Make me kind of lead me through that. Tell me to talk to the person next to me. Tell me to raise my hand. Tell me to do something. Make me laugh. Make me feel. Let me know that you care, that I'm there. Those would be a couple that really stand out to me that I think are difference makers when people show up and do them well.
You're so right. I think it's that constant engagement of like, that's what I see too with really epic speakers. They're constantly engaging and they've got your eye contact and they've this energy in the way that they're speaking, and it's really engaging, and it is that constant, almost like confirmation that it's landing. I think that really helps as well.
Yep. There's it's little. Who's it? Lisa Nichols, I think, does this like yes,
amazing.
Right? Like so, and you've got. I remember I saw Tony Robbins speak a while ago. The first time that I saw him speak, and you know, he's got all kinds of stuff around him, but there's to see him actually handle a room. Was
incredible, right?
It was a masterclass. That's what I didn't listen to his content at all. I just saw how he moved around, and there's something really specific that I feel like only a few people actually like get. when I explain it, I like to explain it so passionately, and people are like, I don't get it. He did this thing where, like, you know, a speaker speaking, and then when they say a good point, the audience will start clapping. Like, yeah, good point. Like, it's this way that we say we agree or we're thankful for what you just said. And what he did was, any time that the audience would start clapping, he would point, or the sound booth was already on it, and they would turn music up, and then it would turn into a dance break of like a minute, 3 minutes, whatever they wanted it to be. But what was happening was this power shift, right? So as soon as the audience claps, now he's not in control as a speaker anymore. But if he turns the music on, he's in control.
Ooh, yeah.
And so I think there's this shift around this. And this is a key focus for speakers to realize that you are in this give and take of control. And when we as an audience feel like you're giving us some control, like intentionally, we love it. And so the dance
Yes.
breaks felt like we were in control because like, we. But what was really happening was him saying like, you don't get to clap on your own time. Are you kidding me? Right? So it's this, again, that's why I say there's this master class that you get to see
Yeah.
there. And so as a speaker, the invitation is invite the audience in,
Yeah.
um,
I think it
but also
also,
recognize you're always in control. You should
yeah,
be.
love that. I love that. I think it also helps to intensify the emotions around what he's sharing too. Like I feel like once you then pump up the music, because I've been
Oh
seen it
yeah,
many
right.
times, you pump up the music, you actually feel good, and it's creating this break that you're all engaging as well. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
this energy
That's why he can
shift
speak
that,
for 4 hours and you feel like it's been four
right?
minutes. It's
Try 16. Last
insane.
time I saw it was 16. I was like, it really changed the way that I saw how you manage your own energy. It's insane.
Yeah.
It's insane. He's
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, is there anything else that you think that, when it comes to creating a magical space on stage, is there anything
Mm.
else that you see that speakers do really well that you think that makes a speech or uh, anything that you're presenting engaging or magical?
Yeah. I mean, I've got a whole like course around this called Make Speaking Magical, right? And
Oh,
this
cool.
is and it's specifically focused because my first love was acting. And so I think of as a performer, what are you doing with the audience? Yeah, it's there's sure there's a fourth wall here, but it is what I learned from my mama, right? Was it's actually about we're in this together. And so any way that you can sort of make your speaking magical, you actually make it more likely that you're remembered. And what's the point of speaking if you're not going to be remembered? So even when I talked about the brain earlier, I do a lot of my focus around speaking is like, how do you speak in such a way that you can actually captivate like different parts of the brain as you go? So say something again, right? So spark an emotion or build trust, build quick connective trust with your audience. Show up and say something really simple, really universal that makes us all go, oh, they're just like me. Something really quick, right? That's a great thing to do. Tell a story. Obviously, tell your story, whether it's your big story, it's just a quick story, something to make us see that, oh, yes, okay, again, they're human. And wow, there's a really good point to this. And they're an authority on what they're talking about.
Mm.
Show a visual. If you've got some kind of visual, whether it's we're talking about Tony Robbins and dancing, that I think would be a visual, right? There's something there that sparked my brain in a way that made it completely memorable and set apart from other speakers. Have an object lesson, an image, a video, something that gets the audience up, whatever it is. That's going to make you stand out.
Mm.
Or if you can spark a conversation. I love doing this, Christine. This is one of my favorite things to do is when I'm in a crowd and then I just go, all right, take a minute, turn to the person next to you and tell them the best party that you've ever been to. And
That's
then they
awesome.
talk. It's an easy question. They go right into it. Energy just explodes because everyone's talking. They're talking with strangers. They're laughing. And I say, okay, bring it back, bring it back. And then I'll talk about something loosely related to a party. You know what the best party I've been to was a potluck. You know what happens at a potluck? Everybody brings something. I wonder if you're bringing your best to your work today because we need you to, right? So like you just take
Ooh,
that one moment and then
so
turn it
good.
into what you want. And if
Yeah.
you can do that well, it feels like we as the audience just actually helped like move the message along.
Mm.
And that's interactive. That is like engaging. And again, so you get into that stuff, that's magic. That's
Yeah.
where it feels like you're doing something beyond just talking words at us.
Yeah, that's it. Spreading, like actually
Yeah.
presenting to rather than actually engaging with. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I say it's inviting and involving rather than just, speaking.
Mm. Where do you think someone should start if they feel that they'd like to do speaking, but it's something that they've never done before and they feel like they're not really necessarily a good storyteller? Where do you think they should
Mm,
start?
mm. Thankfully, we like have a stage in our pocket. I think people undervalue the stage that Instagram is, or social media in any way. You can start speaking to an audience right now. And is that audience 2 people? Maybe. If you make a reel and get only 20 views, do you know how many people would love to have 20 people in a room right now to share their message?
Yeah.
I just think we need to not undervalue the stage that's already in our hands and just start sharing. If you can't share there, there's no way that you can share on a stage with an actual room of live people. It's just not going to happen. So that's a great way to start, is just start with what you've got, the account that you have, start sharing your message authentically, openly, consistently, and
Mm.
see what lands. I'd say you can take it then to podcasting, start your own podcast, be a guest on other people's podcasts, have something really clear that, you invited me on this show because you knew what I would be able to speak about. Get clear on your message, and you're more likely to get on certain podcasts and have good conversations. And then you get to practice speaking, you get to practice engaging, telling good stories, you get to practice. So it's all about the practice until you then start to ask and pitch to the people that are hosting events. And you say, hey, I see you're hosting an event. Do you need a speaker this year or next year? Because here's my topic. I think it would be great for your audience. Let me know.
Mm.
And then you
Love
start
it.
rolling.
Yeah. You're
But you
so
got to start with
right.
what you've got.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. I think you're so right. When I used to run events for like 3 years and would look for speakers, and I'd get
Mm-hmm.
approached by speakers all the time. Well, they weren't necessarily big speakers yet. And the first thing that I would do is go to their socials and see if I could see them speaking, so I could feel their
Mm-hmm.
energy, to see their authenticity, to be able to see if they were a good fit for the event. And majority of the time, the ones that I would get pitched, they weren't actually showing up and doing video online. And
Right.
I was like, how do you expect me to choose you as a speaker if I can't even feel or see
Yeah.
that what you're speaking about?
Yeah.
Right? Like, it blew my mind. And
It's-
yet,
and this is, I think, because, and yeah, you just go, well, why? It's what's the block there where you feel like you've got a strong message because you share strong posts, and it's more like a blog post, and you're sharing pictures with a post. But yes, if you are not using your voice, then why would I hire you to
mm,
use your voice to inspire my people, like at my event? Yeah, that's a really strong disconnect there that I think is important for us to realize. I remember it was, I don't 5 years ago, I guess, when I was like really leaning into, I'm going into business for myself. And my friend who is, he runs his own branding organization, and he's a genius, and he knows me very well. And I was like, oh yeah, okay. I guess to talk to people, I need to send them an email to start or something, or shoot them a DM. I don't know. He's like, no, Alex, you're a speaker. You speak to people. Get on the phone, send voice messages. Everything you do should be with your voice. That's where your strength is. So if
mm,
you consider yourself a speaker, I want you to hear my friend Jared's voice in your ears saying, if you're a speaker, speak,
yeah, don't send an
lead with
email.
that. Yeah. I mean, sometimes you have to, but mostly like that's what I want to be known for. I'm going to keep showing up. I'm going to keep making reels. I'm going to keep doing these things, because just like that, you never know when somebody's looking at your stuff and they want to just get an idea of like, what's their energy like? Who
Yeah.
are they? Can they actually can they actually captivate me? And that's where they're going to see it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Amazing. So I want to ask one or two last questions. So
Brilliant.
if you, when it comes to storytelling, speaking, uncovering your story, what do you wish
Mm.
someone knew about this in order to help them move forward? Or what do you wish they focused on in order for them to move forward?
Simplicity, I
Mm,
think. Um, I see people getting stuck because kind of what we were talking about earlier, right? It's like they're looking for something or waiting for something that actually isn't necessary. It doesn't need to be there. So you're complicating the issue, or you feel like your story is too complicated or it doesn't relate to something. And so we're trying to create this really confusing and complicating thing that's different from anything that we've heard out there. But that's not what we want as a consumer, as an audience. We don't want confusing and complicated. We just want you. So let's make you as simple as possible and your story as simple as possible, and then build out from there. It's again, it's the introduction. It's what do you do? Oh, I'm this. Don't tell me anymore until I ask for it. Right? Like it's just start with simple, then you can expand as the invitation comes or as you get more comfortable with it. But I wish people thought more about how can I make my story simple, or my thought, my concept simple, instead of make it more complicated with more steps so that it stands out from Amy Porterfield's stuff or whatever.
Mm.
Right. So I think that's the game changer right now.
Yeah, I totally agree. Because when you look at like Mel Robbins, the most simplest
Mm-hmm.
thing, 5 second rule, like
Five
it
seconds.
literally is so
That's
simple.
it.
And I think that, yeah,
Yes.
sometimes we totally overcomplicate things.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. So, how can people reach out to you, find you? What's the next step for them? I know that actually, I want to point out that if you want to explore how to uncover your story arc a little bit more, that transformational piece in your story, to definitely go listen to Alex's podcast. I listen to those episodes and I'm like, yeah, gold, absolute gold. So you definitely need to
Yeah.
check that out. I'll put the link in the show notes. Where else
Fabulous.
can we
Thank you.
find you and work with you?
Yeah, I mean, I mostly hang out on Instagram, so that's at Street Says. I'm on there daily, and I love talking in the DMs. So just share something. If something here stood out to you, then just shoot me a DM and say, "Loved your podcast with Christine. This is what stuck out to me," and we'll carry the conversation from there. And then my website is alexstreet.ca, and you can find all the info about one-on-one coaching and my podcast there. And that's the main work. Is for me, it happens in one-on-one and speaking. So let's connect on one of those levels, and I'd love to help you uncover your story and turn it out to the world.
Amazing. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for sharing your story with me today, Alex. It's been so phenomenal. And I just love all the different avenues it went today. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom.
Yeah, this has been such a joy, as I knew it would. You guided it with a masterful precision. Thank you so much. This has been great.
Oh, thanks. Amazing. Chat to you soon.